swinging with each step. She had just left a friend's house 5 doors down, humming her favorite Disney tune. A perfectly normal night, a familiar street, a good girl. And then, as if the world had warped in a moment of silence, Elise was gone. No screams, no traces, no witnesses. At 8:10 p.m., her mother, Rebecca Whitmore, began to worry. She called Elise's friend's house and was told she had left half an hour earlier. By 8:30, the whole block was out of their homes, flashlights in hand, calling Elise's name through the thick fog. The police were called at 9:03 a.m. Grove Avenue, a dilapidated 2-story bungalow with a weedy front yard and a rotting wooden porch. She rented the house through Craigslist. The rent was cheap, $450 a month, no deposit, no background check. The landlord on the phone said only, "Don't open the attic. It's sealed for a reason." Karen laughed. "You hide a dead body up there?" The man didn't smile. He was silent for a few seconds and then hung up. The first 2 nights were quiet. Karen packed her things, set up her desk by the window, made hot tea, and reread the unfinished manuscript of her unfinished novel. But on the 3rd night, when 2 a.m., she heard a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 times. Not too loud, not too soft. Just enough to make her heart jump. Karen woke up, clutching the kitchen knife that was placed on the bedside table. She walked lightly to the door, glancing through the peephole. No one was there. She waited a few seconds. Silence. Then opened the door. A cold wind blew in. All she could see was white mist and empty steps. She reassured herself. It must be the wind, or a hallucination from lack of sleep. But the next night, it happened again. Right again, 2 a.m. 3 knocks. This time she didn't open the door. She sat on the living room couch, listening. 2 hours, 13 minutes. 3 more knocks. Uncannily accurate. The next morning, Karen checked the steps again. There were no footprints, but on the wooden handrail, there was a scratch in the shape of a letter, clearly the letter S, as if someone had carved it with a fingernail or sharp object. By Friday, her sleep had become a series of fitful, pounding sounds in her head. She started searching for information about the house she was living in, and the name Millfield Missing Girl popped up on the first page of Google. Elise Whitmore, missing in 1997. Last seen 5 houses away from Karen's house. Karen felt a chill run down her spine. But that wasn't the worst of it. She found an old police report from 2002, which noted 911 call made from address 1147 Ash Grove Avenue. Caller? Elise Whitmore. 14 years old then. No further investigation notes. No one came to the scene. File closed without explanation. 5 years after Elise disappeared, she called for help. From the very house Karen lived in. That night, Karen did not sleep. She waited, pen and paper in hand. 1 hour, 58 minutes. She was sitting in front of the door. 1 hour, 59 minutes. Heart pounding. 2 o'clock sharp knock, knock, knock. She did not open the door. 2:13. 3 more knocks, and this time, a soft whisper rang out, cold, childish, as if coming from somewhere else. "Don't forget me, please." Karen opened the door. It was empty outside. There was only one piece of paper neatly placed on the doormat. A crayon drawing, a green dragon, wings of blazing fire, scribbled lines. Signature below, Elise. Karen returned home in the drizzle. She stood on the steps, looking back at the door she had opened in the middle of the night, waiting for an explanation. But that afternoon, when she entered the bedroom, she found that the paper with the dragon drawing had disappeared. She searched the house. Nothing. Locked. No sign of forced entry. And on the pillow, there was another piece of paper. Still crayons, clumsy drawings. A little girl stood in front of the attic door. In her hand was a piece of paper. Behind her was a tall figure with a dark face. Karen stood there, stunned. The air around her seemed to thicken. She couldn't breathe deeply, couldn't think straight. And then, from upstairs, 3 knocks came. Knock, knock, knock. Not from the front door, from the attic. The next morning, it was raining lightly. Tiny droplets of water gathered on the window panes, as if hundreds of eyes were watching Karen from outside. The air in the house was thick with something hard to describe. Not exactly a musty smell, but a feeling of antiquity, as if time here moved a few beats slower than the rest of the world. Karen woke with a heavy head and fragments of memories from the night before. The knocking, the whispering, and the drawing of the dragon, still on the kitchen table. She hadn't thrown it away, hadn't had the courage to keep it in her bedroom. There was something about that scribble that made her feel like an intruder, like she was stepping into a story that was never hers. She stepped out into the hallway, her bare feet cold on the wooden floor. When she looked up, she stopped. The door leading to the attic was open. Not quite open, but just enough to expose the old hinges and knob. This would not have been possible without some outside force. She remembered clearly when she first moved in, trying to open the door herself, but it was blocked by 2 large rusty nails, driven diagonally from the outside like a seal. Now there are no nails left. Karen slowly climbed the old wooden stairs, her footsteps echoing in a cave. She stopped at the bottom step, took a deep breath, and pushed the door all the way up. The attic was dark, with only a small slit of light coming from the wood behind, like a silver thread cutting through the darkness. There was no furniture, no mice, no dust. There was only a small wooden box placed right in the middle of the room. Karen sat down, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the lid. Inside was a sheaf of discolored papers bound with pale pink yarn, frayed and crumbling at the corners. On the first sheet was written, "If anyone finds these lines, I won't have time to leave." The handwriting is small, slanted, and careful like that of an elementary school student, but there is something compressed. She began to read. The paper is a diary, or rather a buried account. Elise tells of her first days. The location is unclear, but it was a dark, windowless room with only a wooden bed and a musty smell. She says she wasn't tied up or beaten, just held day after day by someone whose face was never revealed. He just knocks 3 times every morning, brings food, orders books, and never says anything. And so it went, for 5 years. The last page in the diary was a hasty and water-stained cry for help. "I miss the light. I miss my mother. I miss my voice." Karen leaned against the wall, still holding the last piece of paper, her throat dry. She couldn't help but imagine a child left in the dark, 5 long years with only the sound of knocking on the door to keep her company. That night, Karen did not turn on the lights. She sat alone in the living room, the box placed in front of her, next to the paper with the dragon drawing. She turned on the tape recorder, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "My name is Karen Alden. I live at 1147 Ash Grove Avenue, the house that once belonged to Elise Whitmore's family. I believe there is something that has never been revealed, and I think Elise has come back." She sat there late into the night, no knocking, no whispering, just silence. The kind of silence that was more frightening than any sound. The next day, she decided to go to the town library. Most of Millfield had forgotten about Elise, or chosen not to mention her. But the old librarian, an old woman named Marge, in her 70s, stopped when she heard the name Whitmore in her hand as she was shelving books. "That girl," she muttered. "I saw her once, a few years after everyone thought she was dead." Karen sat up. "You saw Elise?" "Where?" Marge stared at her eyes glassy. "In the same house, just once. He sat in the attic window, long hair, white face, looking down the street. I'll never forget the look in his eyes, as if he'd seen the end of the darkness." The house was dark as a bottomless pit. Karen stood at the foot of the stairs, her head tilted up to look at the slightly open attic door. The air was getting thinner, and she had to tell herself, "Breathe. Calm down." But then 3 knocks came again. Not slow, not fast, just enough to make her throat tighten. Knock, knock, knock. They came from inside the attic, not from outside the front door, like before. Karen tightened her grip on the flashlight. At that moment, the electricity in the house seemed to flicker. The living room light suddenly went out. All sounds seemed to be sucked into the void. She stepped onto the first step. It rang, creak, but Karen didn't back down. She couldn't. She was too deep into this hole now. She couldn't pretend she hadn't heard, hadn't seen. The attic was now lit only by the weak flashlight in her hand. The musty smell was still there, but there was something new. A faint, ashy smell, as if someone had burned something not long ago. She walked in. To the left, where the diary box had been, was an old mirror against the wall. Karen was sure it hadn't been there yesterday. The mirror was large, the wooden frame peeling, but its surface was strangely bright, reflecting the flashlight like a still lake. Karen moved closer, close enough to see myself clearly. Messy hair, dark eyes from lack of sleep. Then she saw a figure behind her. She turned around. No one was there. Her heart pounded. She turned to the mirror. The figure was gone, but on the mirror appeared a line of words, blurred but clear in the mist. "I never left here." There was no other sound, just Karen and the panic rising in her mind. She took out her phone, intending to take a picture of the words. But when she raised her phone, the words disappeared, as if they had never existed. Karen stepped back out of the attic. When the door closed behind her, she locked it with an old chain she'd found in the shed. Though she knew it was probably useless, it at least made her feel like she had some control. She decided to do something that perhaps she would have considered crazy before. "Call the police." The call center answered in a cold voice. When she mentioned Elise Whitmore and strange stains in the attic, the person on the other end hesitated for a moment. Then she transferred the call to an officer named Rayner. Rayner's voice was low and a little tired. "Ms. Alden, this house was inspected in 2002. Nothing was found. I recommend you contact a mental health professional if you feel you are under stress." Karen growled, I'm not hallucinating. There are ash stains. There are words in the mirror. There are drawings. I have proof." But the call ended with a thank you and a good night. Karen sat back down at the table and opened Elise's diary again. There was one thing she hadn't noticed. On the back of the last page, there was a very small line, written slanted close to the edge. "If I can't speak, I'll draw." That explains the pictures. She decided to do the only thing she could. Turn on the tape recorder again and tell the whole story in order, from day one to today, like a keeper of memories, like a witness forced to continue. Night fell sooner than usual. The rain was pouring down and the wind was strong, rattling the windows. Karen didn't dare go upstairs. She sat down on the sofa and fell asleep. The flashlight was on the table, and her phone was fully charged. 2 a.m., no knocking. 2:13 silent. Then, from the attic, a soft music sounded. Not big, but clear. A lullaby in a female voice. Distant, distorted, like from an old radio. Karen didn't wait any longer. She jumped up, turned on the flashlight, and climbed the stairs with trembling legs. The attic door was still locked. The chain was still in place, but the sound still came from inside. And this time, there was another knock. Not 3, 5 hours. Knock, 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 knock. For the first time, Karen felt fear not from behind the door, but from within her. An old fear, primal, as if the cells in her body were warning her to run. She did not open the door, just stand there and listen. The lullaby ends with a long, drawn-out note, like a hiccup. The next morning, when Karen opened her front door to get the newspaper, she found a yellow envelope on the doorstep. No sender's name, just the words, "For those who listen." She opened it. Inside was an old black and white photograph. A little girl with long hair, wearing a floral dress, sat on the floor, her eyes looking straight into the camera. Nothing unusual, except for a dark shadow in the corner of the photo, resembling the shape of an adult. But only the hand, resting on the girl's shoulder, was visible. Behind the photo is a piece of paper with a single line written on it. "I have never forgotten." Karen sank down on the steps, her hands shaking. She was no longer sure if she was searching for the truth or being led by the truth. In the evening, the weather turns cold. Karen lit a candle in the room, turned on the recording, and played it through the speakers. Strangely enough, the sound of her own voice telling the story made her feel safe, as if the words themselves were a rope keeping her from slipping deeper into some kind of trance. But when it got to the part about the mirror, the speaker suddenly let out a high-pitched screech, as if someone was interrupting the recording. Then a childish voice interrupted, "You're wrong. I've never seen a mirror." Karen hung up. Cannot. This is a recording of just her voice. No edits, no cuts. She turned it back on. The part was gone. No more children's voices. She stood up, feeling as if she were being watched. But not from behind. From inside the house. The photo of Elise on the table seemed to be tilted slightly, and below it a new line of text appeared, written in bright red. "I'm telling your story, but you're still alive." Karen stepped back, her mouth dry. Elise is alive? Karen couldn't sleep that night, not because of the knocking or the shadow, but because of herself, because of an unease that no longer existed outside the house. It had crept inside, lurking in every dark corner, every crack in the door, every page of the diary she held tightly in her hand. She could no longer tell what was real and what was imaginary. But deep down, she knew one thing. Elise's story was not over. And the more she read and learned, the more she felt like a character summoned back here to witness a drama that had been left hanging for 2 decades. The next morning, the sky was strangely clear. The sun shone softly through the windows as if there had never been a storm the night before. But Karen knew better. What was happening here was not the weather. She stepped out onto the porch and checked the mailbox. Nothing. No more photos like the day before. Back inside, she decided to tidy up the living room, trying to do something normal to feel like she was still in control. As she cleaned out the cupboard under the stairs, she found an old rug spread over another floorboard. It looked like someone had hidden something there once, then hastily covered it up. She turned over. Under the carpet was a long crack in the wooden floor, just big enough to fit a small object. Karen opens the file. First is the static sound. Then, a whisper, vague. A little girl's voice, very small, as if speaking in a breath. She knows. She saw the dragon. Then, a small laugh, but not happy. This laughter did not come from a child. It came from somewhere else, twisted and warped. Karen startled and hung up. There was no doubt about it. Someone was watching her, not just through what she did during the day, but also recording her sleep when she was at her weakest. And Elise, or Elise's spirit, seemed to be trying to communicate or warn. Karen began writing down everything that happened, every detail, every hour. She needed to compare. She needed to organize. And then she saw something strange. Each new object, painting, doll, photo, appears on the 7th, 13th, or 25th of the month. Day 7, the day Elise went missing. Day 13, first knocks increase. 25th, not yet. But today is the 24th. She decided to take a risk, go back to the attic. Despite her fear, Karen knew. The truth wasn't downstairs. It was up there. She packed everything. Flashlight, voice recorder, video phone. This time she wanted everything recorded. No more doubts, no more lost files. As I walked up the stairs, the attic smelled musty for the first time. On the contrary, there is a light scent, like baby powder. She shined the light around. The left corner of the wall, which used to be empty, now has a painting hanging on the wall. Small painting. Old wooden frame. Inside is a charcoal drawing. A woman was standing, looking straight out. Her face was unclear, but on her chest was a maple leaf. At the woman's feet sat a baby, huddled, no ears. Karen felt her heart beating so fast she felt like fainting. She reached out and removed the painting from the wall. Behind the picture frame, there is a rolled-up piece of paper stuffed into the slot. Opening it, she saw the words, "Tomorrow is the 25th. He will be back, but not for you this time." She took the picture, left the attic, locked the door. There was a sense of urgency, as if someone was counting down in her head. That night, she prepared more than ever. Lock all doors. Program indoor cameras. Place small doorbell traps along the way upstairs. And then, wait. 2 a.m. No knocking. 2:13. Nothing. 2:25. The phone vibrated. Motion alert on the stairs. Karen rushed out, flashlight in hand, and turned on the camera. No one. But the bell trap on step number 5 was stepped on. The bell fell to the floor. She shined the light. There was no one in sight. But on the wall, blood, or something reddish-brown. The doll lied. Karen stepped back, a tingling sensation running down her spine. Her hands tightened around the drawing of the doll, which now had ears again. Millfield, 7 a.m., 25th October. The next morning was unusually overcast. Thick clouds hung over the town like a gray blanket. Karen woke with a dry throat and a pounding headache. Everything in the house was strangely quiet, as if it had been waiting for her to come out first. She checked her phone, no new messages. But there was an unfamiliar email, the subject line simply, "About Elise." The sender had no name, just a strange address, newknows@protonmail.com. In the email, there was only the line, "I looked after Elise. I know what happened, but you need to hear it, not read it. Meet me at 10 a.m. at Mary's Garden Tea Shop. I sit at the table near the window. I'm blind, but I see very well." Karen read the last line over and over again. "I am blind, but I see very clearly." Should she believe it? Or was this another sick joke? But some part of her knew that this email wasn't like the others. It wasn't scary. It was inviting, like someone wanted to help. At 10 a.m., Karen entered Mary's Garden Tea Shop, a renovated old house paneled with wood and filled with dried flowers hanging from the ceiling. The space was cozy, with a light scent of black tea. She looked around. Near the window, just as the email said, was an older woman with gray hair, dark glasses, and a striped tweed dress. She was small, but there was something alert about her. Karen approached. Before she could speak, she spoke first, her voice clear. "You are Karen. I can hear the way you walk." Soft steps, but full of doubt. Karen sat down. "You sent the email?" She nodded. "My name is Eleanor. I used to live next door to the Whitmores, and I was the last person to hear from Elise, after the whole town believed she was gone." Karen held her breath. "What did you see?" Eleanor chuckled. "Not seeing, feeling. I've been blind since I was 23. But you know what? When one sense is gone, the others become much more acute. I can smell crayons 2 doors down. I can hear locks unlocking in the middle of the night, and not from the front door." Karen sat up straight. "You said Elise is alive?" Eleanor nodded. "I believe so, and I believe you are coming Finally, a used bookstore downtown sold her a Sony from the 90s. She went home, closed the door, drew the curtains, pulled out her phone and started recording the whole thing. Put the tape in the player. Press play. A crackling sound. Then, a girl's voice. Young, thin as a thread, but not trembling. My name is Elise. If anyone hears this tape, it means I didn't make it. But I don't want anyone to forget. I live in the attic of the red loft. There's a vent that connects to the floor below, and I can hear everything. There's a man. Doesn't talk, doesn't touch me, but knocks 3 times every day at 2 a.m. Then Elise's voice choked up. I tried knocking close. She turned off the tape. Tears welled up uncontrollably. Elise was not kidnapped in the usual way. She was held captive in this very town by someone who lived among the people, but was never suspected. Someone patient enough, sick enough, to keep a child for 5 years, knocking on the door every night like a ritual. That night, Karen opened all the doors of the house. She was no longer afraid that something would come in. She was afraid of herself, because now she understood. Everything that was happening was not just about Elise. Around 2 a.m., no knocking, but there was a lullaby echoing from right inside the house. The singing did not sound as loud as if it were coming from a loudspeaker. It was soft, but clear, as if someone was whispering right next to my ear. The lyrics were unclear, but Karen caught the last part. If you still remember me, then tell me everything. Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. You know. Karen stood frozen. Then suddenly, her memory flashed. An image flashed. Little Elise, standing in front of the Whitmore house, so young, smiling at someone. That person was Karen, when she was a child. Millfield, October 26th. The next morning, Karen sat motionless for nearly an hour before getting out of bed. The only question in her mind was, why do I miss Elise? Part of her insisted, no. She had never lived in Millfield. But another, quieter, older part was beginning to stir beneath the layers of memory. A fleeting image, a familiar street, a house with a red roof. She went into the warehouse and found the box of memorabilia her mother had left behind after she died. It was full of old books, family photos, and handwritten letters. She had never opened them carefully, thinking there was nothing special about them, until she found an old album, its spine peeling and its leather cover worn. Turning the first page, Karen shivered. The first photo is of her, about 7 years old, playing jump rope with a younger girl. That girl is Elise. Elise's face is younger, her eyes bright, her hair braided on both sides. On the back of the photo, her mother's handwriting wrote, Karen and Elise, Spring 1996, Old Millfield House. Karen put her head in her hands. Her whole body was shaking. Everything she had believed, that she had just arrived at Millfield for the first time, that she and Elise did not know each other, was wrong. She used to live here. Elise used to be her best friend. And somehow, that memory was erased. She rummaged around further and found a small diary, pink cover, heart-shaped lock, no key. But the leather cover was rotten, easy to pry open with a knife. Inside, childish scribbles. Mom told me not to tell anyone about Elise playing in the attic. But I saw it. I saw the dragon. I saw the blood. But I didn't tell anyone, because Mom said, this will destroy our family. Karen almost dropped the notebook. Her mother ever knew. She turned it over. There was a photo pressed in, so old it was warped. There were 3 people in it, Elise, Karen, and a bespectacled man with prematurely gray hair, giving the girls ice cream. The man's face was scribbled in black, as if someone wanted to erase him from the picture. In the afternoon, Karen went to the Millfield Town Records office, which had residential records going back to 1980. The old clerk checked the list and confirmed, Miss Alden's family used to live at 1151 Ashgrove, left in 1997, a few months after Elise went missing. Karen asked further, Do you have a picture of my house from that time? The clerk turned the book. Yes, here. The photo was an old satellite image, black and white with no details. But there was one thing that stopped her. Karen's house and Elise's house share the same roof. That is, used to be the same house, later divided into two. Karen returned home, feeling as if she had just emerged from a nightmare. If Elise had lived under the same roof as her, then this attic had belonged to both of them. And if Elise had been imprisoned in this very attic, who locked it? She went back up to the attic. The mirror was still there. The pictures were still there. But this time, there was a new crack in the wooden floor in the middle of the room. She knelt down and tapped lightly with the hammer. Hollow. Karen turned the board over. Underneath was a thick, heavy wooden box with no lock. There was only a red ink mark, circular like the old library seal. She opened it. Inside was a VHS tape labeled KW, October 1997. KW. Karen Whitmore? No, she's Alden. But Elise is Elise Whitmore. And then she suddenly remembered, as children, they used to call each other sisters. Karen and Elise? Same mother, but different fathers. Karen used to live here. She's Elise's half-sister. Karen's head was spinning, but she took the VHS tape to the electronics repair shop anyway. As the shopkeeper inserted the tape into the player, the screen blurred for a few seconds. Then the image became clear. Karen, about 8 years old, sitting in the living room. Elise sat next to her. The child smiled, eating the cake. The cameraman was a man, his voice low, soft, familiar. Be good kids. Whoever tells what happened yesterday will make Dad angry. Karen's childish voice rang out. I won't tell. Elise won't either. The rest of the scene cuts out, but the last frame is the attic, dark, and Elise's voice. Dad, it's so cold. Karen burst into tears. That man was her stepfather. Millfield, night of the 26th of October. Karen sat in the middle of the living room, the light from the ceiling lamp flickering as if it were about to go out. On the table, the VHS tape was still in her hand. The image of Elise huddled on the screen was burned into her retina. She couldn't deny it anymore. The man filming, the man holding Elise captive, was her stepfather. And somehow, Karen had witnessed it. Perhaps as a victim, or as an unconscious accomplice. At night, the wind whistled through the cracks in the window, like someone whispering from afar. Karen lay in the dark, eyes wide open, unblinking. She did not dare to sleep, because she knew, this time, if she dreamed, it would no longer be a dream. But it is true. Around 3 a.m., she fell asleep. In her dream, she was no longer an adult. She was 8 years old, wearing a white dress, holding a cookie. Elise, who was younger, was sitting in a small windowless room. Karen walked in and said softly, Don't scream. Dad said you can't scream. Elise raised her head. I'm cold. Karen put the cake on the floor. Don't come near. If I say anything to Mom, Dad will beat us both. Elise didn't answer. She just hugged her knees, eyes unblinking. The dream faded, leaving behind the sound of the attic door closing from outside. Karen woke up with a start. Her heart was pounding. Her pillow was soaked with sweat. It's not a dream. That is memory. She ran into the bathroom, turned on the faucet hard, and looked at herself in the mirror. Part of her wanted to smash the mirror, Another part wanted to knock on it 3 times. By noon, she decided to meet Mrs. Eleanor again. This time, she was not surprised to see her. "You remember, don't you?" she asked, as if she already knew. Karen nodded. No need to hide it anymore. "I found myself leaving Elise there every day, but I don't know why I didn't remember for 20 years. Eleanor poured tea slowly. "There are memories that are locked away by fear, and if someone is evil enough, they can make a child believe that what they see is a dream." Karen asked her, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Eleanor took her hand. "Because I was once a locked-up child, like Elise. But I survived because I knew. Silence was the only way to survive." She pulled out of her pocket an old piece of paper, crumpled with torn edges. "I found this yesterday under my window." His childish writing. "Karen, I didn't mean to." "I know, but you have to tell me. Otherwise, I'll be here forever." Karen returned home, her heart heavy. She should have told this story 20 years ago. But no one forced her to keep quiet, except fear and paralyzing guilt. That evening, she filmed a video telling the world, "My name is Karen Alden, but I used to be Karen Whitmore. I am the half-sister of Elise, the girl who went missing in 1997. She told him everything. About her stepfather, about the attic, about the terrible silence, about the knocking and the dragon painting. Then she made the video public. No deletion, no editing. That night she slept. For the first time, she slept without nightmares. Until exactly 2 a.m. No knocking, just a whisper in the wind. Thank you. The next morning, Karen went out on the porch. On the steps was a small box, pale pink wrapping paper, carefully tied with string. Inside was the doll Elise had drawn. But this time, it has full ears. And below is a handwritten note. I hear you. Millfield, November 2. Shocking news spread through the small town like a quiet spark in a haystack. Police discovered the body of a child in the attic wall of 1147 Ash Grove. No one speaks loudly in the coffee shop. No one laughs in the grocery store. No one looks each other in the eye on the street. Because everyone knew Elise, and all were silent. Karen sat in front of the TV, watching the noon news. The reporter talked about the initial findings, about the small skeleton wrapped in an old pink blanket and a crayon drawing stuffed into the skull. A little girl holding a flashlight stands in the dark. Behind her is the silhouette of her older sister, who is turning away. Karen didn't cry, she didn't panic, just silent. She didn't need anyone to tell her. She knew the skeleton was Elise, and the only person Elise painted was her. That afternoon, Karen entered the attic for the last time. She brought no lights, no cameras, no tape recorders. She only brought the doll with ears, the evidence of the whole story, and her last sincere words. There was still some white dust on the wooden floor where the police had just removed the wall. Karen knelt down, placed the doll in front of that empty space, and whispered, I remember, Elise. I didn't save you. I wasn't strong enough. But now I'll speak for you. Tell everything. Let the world know you existed. No one can erase you anymore. The wind blew through the cracks in the wall. The sound of the wind was like the soft laughter of children, not to laugh mockingly, but forgiveness. The next morning, Karen received a handwritten letter. There was no sender's name, just the first line. I'm the police officer who investigated the Elise case in 1997. The letter was long, but it was the last part that made her hands tremble. I went to her house. She was 7, opened the door, said Elise was visiting her grandmother. I looked into her eyes, and I knew something was wrong, but my superiors told laid the groundwork for a small memorial to the missing child victims. Not many people were there, but in the back row, Karen saw Eleanor, her hair tied up, leaning on her cane, nodding slightly. She didn't need to say anything. Karen understands. That night, Karen slept very deeply and dreamed. In her dream, she saw Elise, no longer the gaunt child she had been before. She was sitting drawing, her hair in pigtails, wearing a yellow dress. Elise looked up and smiled. "I'm not mad at you anymore. You see me." Karen came forward, wanting to hug her sister. But Elise raised her hand. No. I have things to do." The little girl gave Karen a blank notebook. "Go on. There are many people who have not heard your story." Karen opened her eyes. It was not yet light. On the desk, there was a brand new blank notebook. Karen couldn't remember when she bought it. But she was not afraid, not confused. She just smiled.